We made it to the end of the road. The offseason, the longest offseason ever officially, is over. Tonight is the eve of 2021 49ers training camp. That means that we're going to be back at Levi Stadium. We're going to be back inside at Levi Stadium in the press room. And we're going to be able to embark on what should be a really interesting 2021 journey. So it only felt right because this was the off season during which I started these YouTube lives. It only felt right to wrap one up for the off season. Don't worry, I'm going to be coming to you during the regular season, but it's going to be a different pace. It should be a little bit more frenetic. We should have some developments. We should be able to stop just mindlessly speculating over and over again because football is finally going to happen. What I have here in the corner is the 49ers 53-man depth chart projection along with their whole 90-man roster. I could tell at the top there, you could see the little icons at the top. That means several of you are browsing it right now. So you can join that and you can go ahead and make your own 53-man depth chart projection by just moving guys around to different cells. But we can just sit here and talk, and I'm happy to take all of your questions as we preview training camp. The point of these YouTube lives is to preview camp in an informal kind of way where you can interact with me and obviously lead you to some of my work on The Athletic. To keep you updated on what I'm working on there in the more long form kind of world, I just finished a nice big piece on Steve Young. So you know that I love writing about 49ers history. Be on the lookout for a nice big piece about Steve Young in the coming days. I'll keep the rest of it under wraps, but hopefully that helps you pass even more time between now and the start of the regular season on September 12th. Anyway, I'm just going to get straight to the questions because that's what this is all about. Our first one is in from Music is Life. Hey, David, what are you looking forward to going back at Levi's? What are you looking forward to most going back to Levi's? I'm just excited to be in the same room as some of these guys again, as Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch and whichever players they bring out. I think the 49ers might bring out Nick Bosa tomorrow. We're not going to be in the locker room proper, but they should bring Bosa. And, if they don't bring Bosa, maybe somebody else out to the interview room. It's been a long time since I've seen these guys in person because I'm one of those people that says that Zoom doesn't count. I think, I even avoided raising my hand a lot of times in these Zoom calls just because it's so unnatural, so stilted. Yes, I mean, if there was a pressing nuts and bolts question to be asked, you ask it, but I got most of my stuff, through phone calls behind the scenes and through, just more natural ways of communication. And I'm so excited for the natural method of communication to return. We're going to be back in person with some of these guys. Now, even though that locker room access won't immediately be back, that's the most natural end of the spectrum. At least we're getting partway there, right? Being in the same room. So I'm really looking forward to that tomorrow. This is the question on most people's minds as far as it relates to football operations for the 49ers. Why hasn't Trey Lance signed his contract yet? Well, remember today, Ambry Thomas, who hadn't signed his contract yet either, he finally inked his deal with the 49ers. So now the only remaining unsigned contract is that of Trey Lance. And people are confused because rookie deals are, for the most part, preset. The signing bonus is preset. The average per year is preset. There's not a whole lot of wiggle room, especially compared to free agent deals. That being said, there are some more minute details that can be negotiated, especially for first round and for third round picks. So in the case of the third round picks, that was Trey Sermon and Ambry Thomas. It took them a while to sign their deals as well. In my opinion, I'm just speculating here. Again, I want to separate speculation from fact, but it seems to me that there was probably some disagreement about the offset languages in those contracts. And that is to say, if the 49ers cut Trey Sermon or Ambry Thomas early, how would, the guaranteed money and the offset pay be handled in those contracts later down the line? I think the same issue might be there with Trey Lance's deal. And let's not act like it's a massive issue that hasn't been encountered before. In fact, remember back to when Solomon Thomas signed, he literally inked his contract up in the GM's office and then sprinted down toward the practice field. That's how close to the start of training camp it was. So what you see in these situations, because the contract is generally preset, both sides want to get it signed and want to get it done. But both sides also, just for the hell of it, want to get the best possible deal for their interests. So you'll see that the start of training camp acts as a sort of deadline pressure to get the deal done. Both sides hold out until the very start of training camp, then they're going to get the deal done. So I would expect Trey Lance to get finished either today, it's Monday night, or Tuesday, tomorrow's check-in day, and it should be done by the time the practice starts on Wednesday at 10:17 a.m. I'm not kidding. Exactly 10:17 a.m. is when the 49ers start practice, because it's in nobody's interest, especially not in Trey Lance's interest, to not be able to be on the practice field come Wednesday. He's only hurting his career if he's not learning, not competing out on that practice field. So I see that as the deadline pressure. I mean, we saw Fred Warner's contract get done with deadline pressure. We're seeing the Aaron Rodgers situation in Green Bay get resolved because of the deadline pressure. So a preset contract for Trey Lance, where the only disagreement may be because of some kind of offset language, that's not going to be immune to the deadline pressure either. I think it gets signed. What will media access look like this year? Will we get players on the podcast again? That's a really good question. I want players back on the podcast. Media access, as of right now, is going to be through the media room. So they're going to bring players into the auditorium. We can hope that things progress. I'm not holding my breath, but if they do, that would mean the resumption of locker room access. I cannot emphasize how much good stuff, and I know a lot of you read me on The Athletic, and hopefully I've kind of cultivated a culture of being able to get some real behind the scenes stories, some really colorful stuff that you don't necessarily see at the press conference. I can't emphasize how valuable locker room access is to the style of work that I do, the style of work that Matt Barrows does at The Athletic, to what Tim Kawakami does at The Athletic. Marcus Thompson comes in. I mean, he writes awesome Warriors pieces, but he comes in and writes awesome 49ers pieces. And I mean, almost all of our very best pieces come because we are in the locker room. We get to know these players, and we're not just like roaming around with the scrum, because in the locker room, what you have, especially when the 49ers are good, especially before a big game, during the playoffs, you have like 30 people in there. And a lot of people will parachute in during the playoffs that haven't been there during the regular season. And so they don't really know the guys, right? They haven't developed that personal connection. And so, kind of the horde will just move from popular player to popular player. So for example, I decided that I want to go and, go talk to Eric Armstead. This happened this last year. So I go and start talking to Eric Armstead. It was 2 seasons ago, I guess, before the divisional playoffs against the Vikings. And all of a sudden, I feel that I'm having a private conversation with Eric Armstead, but all of a sudden there's 30 people around my shoulder with microphones going over my shoulder. Thankfully, I'm pretty tall, so it's hard to get the microphone over me, but I can no longer have a private conversation with Eric Armstead. But anyway, my point is that when you're in the locker room, you can angle and try to develop the opportunity to have those one-on-one conversations where you can get to the better stories. You can better tell a player's story than if they're just coming up to a podium, and obviously they're going to be more stilted answering a question for 50 people in attendance. So I'm afraid that media access is going to be more like the scrum situation, obviously people further away, but more like, okay, one question for one person and then 30 people are listening for it. And it's not going to be as great as it was in 2019 and before then, but it's still going to be better than it was in 2020 when it was only a Zoom call. So I'm not greedy. You have your sources outside of the press conferences. You call up, the people that around the team, on the team, separately, and good content still comes out of that. But you do, as a reporter, hope for open locker room at some point, because that helps us convey the stories better and helps everybody. It conveys your enjoyment, I think, of, it helps the fans connect to what's going on, because the backstories are what allow people to really relate to these guys who are such great football players and who put on such a entertaining product on the field. This is interesting because in our special teams preview, I addressed this, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this tomorrow in the 53-man roster projection that Matt Barrows and I are coming out with. The question's from Eric Asmus, and it says, thoughts on Ayuk returning punts full time? I'm a big time proponent of that. I think that the goal in the sport of football, at least one of the main goals offensively, is to give playmakers opportunities in space with the football in their hands. And punt returns, by definition, are one of the ways to do that. I mean, Kyle Shanahan tries to scheme up opportunities for Brandon Ayuk to run around the field all the time on offense. You don't really even have to scheme it up as an offensive play caller if Brandon Ayuk gets that chance on punt returns. And, a great story about Brandon Ayuk. This comes from his Santa Rosa Junior College days, or actually, it came against Santa Rosa Junior College. So this was at Santa Rosa. This was back when Brandon Ayuk was playing for Sierra College in Rockland, where the 49ers used to have training camp. Similar kind of dilemma issue that we have now for Brandon Ayuk back then. What happened is that Brandon Ayuk was dominating offensively, but his coach pulled him off of special teams because he was afraid he was getting overworked. Brandon Ayuk was very upset that he got pulled off of special teams because he thought he should be touching the ball at all times because he was obviously the best player on his team and the best player on the field. So normally a really talkative guy, a guy who was really affable with his coach, Brandon Ayuk, he just started ignoring his coach. They would pass in the hallway and Brandon Ayuk would, just give him the cold shoulder, kind of just grunt when he walked by him. And his coach, whose name is Ben Noonan, great guy, still the coach over there at Sierra College in Rockland, noticed that something was up with Brandon Ayuk. So he pulls Brandon off to the side at practice or after practice, and he says, "Hey, man, what's up? Like, you've been giving me the cold shoulder. You're acting really cold lately." And Brandon Ayuk said that he was just pissed off that he had taken him off of the punt and kick return units. So he essentially said, "Coach, give me the football. Give me an opportunity. You will not regret it." Fast forward to the game, Sierra College at Santa Rosa Junior College, and Brandon Ayuk houses a kickoff return for a touchdown and a punt return for the touchdown in the same game. Sierra wins the game, and it just so happened it was right after his coach's mother had died. Ben Noonan's mother had died, and so it was a super emotional moment for Coach Noonan. And obviously Brandon Ayuk emotional as well because his coach believed in him and he repaid that faith in him. Now, I'm not saying that the NFL is junior college ball. It's a lot harder to return punts in the NFL, but I think the same rules still apply. If Brandon Ayuk is your best playmaker in space with the ball in his hands, he's your best playmaker in space with the ball in his hands. He can get hurt just as easily, in my opinion, running a screen pass or running something like he did against Philadelphia where he hurdled that defender as he will on punt returns. The demonstrated area of greater injuries is kickoff returns, which is why the NFL has essentially tried to eliminate kick returns by moving the tee up to the 35-yard line. And now you see a ton of touchbacks. I think Kyle Shanahan would be insane to put Brandon Ayuk back on kick returns. He could use somebody else for that. But for punt returns, I would argue that at least in high leverage spots, and there are certain returns that you could pick out as more high leverage spots, you toss them in there. On top of that, I was at the NFC Championship game to close the 2011 season for the 49ers. I saw Kyle Williams fumble twice. I saw him also, on top of that, dive for a fair catch, which is one of the biggest no-nos in punt returning. And I recognize the need for a guy to be comfortable back there. So why not just put Brandon Ayuk back there all the time? Because if you're only putting him there for high leverage situations, I would think there's a non-zero chance that his fumble rate or his muff rate might go up. So give him as many game reps as possible. If you're going to do something, don't half-ass it. And I don't think the 49ers can afford to half-ass their punt returning situation. They just lost way too much efficiency from it last year. It cost them football games. You can't let special teams cost you football games. Yeah, the 49ers did pick up a returner off waivers from the Rams. But you don't even know if he's going to make the 53-man roster. I mean, here, I have the roster available, so why don't we zoom in on what the 49ers have. I could make this bigger for you. I put Simba Webster in the receiver room, so hopefully you guys can see this. Right now I'm going to highlight the receiver room. The left side here under gold is players I project to make the 53-man roster. The right side is players who I currently have on the outside looking in. I'm not sure about Mohamed Sanu at all. First of all, he looked great during OTAs. I just couldn't fit him when Barrows and I made our 53-man roster, so I currently have him on the outside looking in. Simba Webster, who I highlighted right there, is the returner they picked up from the Rams. So, I mean, somebody's might have to get hurt for him to get on the roster, or he'll impress the 49ers so much as a punt returner that he'll, get to the left side of this line. But for now, you have all these players, that's what, 8 players on the outside looking in, and then have the 49ers with 6 receivers and 4 tight ends making it on the left. And that's what's going to make training camp so freaking exciting right now, because you have these battles. Some of them are wide open, especially at the receiver spot. Beyond right here, Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel, it's just question mark after question mark after question mark. I mean, Jalen Hurd's a question mark. In my opinion, Richie James is a question mark. Sherfield might be, the least of the question marks there. I mean, the guy has some guaranteed money. He's a special teams ace. I think he makes the roster. I think he's much more of a safe bet than a guy like Juwan Jennings or even Jalen Hurd, because you don't know what Jalen Hurd's going to bring you from a health perspective. But if he's healthy, of course, Jalen Hurd's your number 3 receiver, with Juwan Jennings being great depth right there. Just such a big if right now. So great question. I still think Brandon Ayuk's your most talented player with the ball in his hand. So why not give him a chance on those punt returns? Based on my understanding, D Ford is going to practice and is going to be available in training camp, but I'm not 100% sure yet. This is something that Matt Barrows and I reported way back in March, that D Ford was working hard to be ready. And that surprised a lot of people, because the assumption was that he was just going to coast into retirement and try to collect some injury guaranteed money. It's not the case. It's looking like he wants to redeem himself and get back on the field. Whether or not that's sustainable and will actually come to fruition, I don't know. But based on what I've heard, based on what Fred Warner said a few days ago, he's looking good. And we might even see him on the field during training camp. And because of that, I'm just going to scroll down a little bit more here. Look what I've done. I've taken D Ford off of a projected injury list, and I put him as edge depth behind Samson Ebukam. Oh no, I just erased Ebukam. That's not good. All right, there we go. Yeah, didn't want to eliminate Ebukam from the team there accidentally here. So you have Nick Bosa on one edge, Ebukam starting on the other, D Ford behind him. If D Ford pans out, plays at his former level, of course he's going to be better than Ebukam. D Ford is a Pro Bowl level edge rusher. You just can't count on that. And then Arden Key, that's really, really interesting to me. Arden Key had a good pressure rate last year. It was above average. He didn't have any sacks, but he had a good pressure rate. And to me, that indicated the 49ers saw signs of life in his game. Signs of life that the Raiders had wished they'd seen much earlier, but they didn't. So the 49ers gave Key some guaranteed money, still a small deal, but still some guaranteed money. And if you just put him and Chris Kasarik in the same room and see what happens, I don't think that's a bad plan for a guy making essentially a minimum contract with some guaranteed money to go along with that. At a position like edge, where Kasarik has shown that he can yield, great production out of players who have previously not done as much, such as Kerry Hyder, it's great. As long as you're not relying on Arden Key to be your Nick Bosa, he could be a solid little depth piece. So that's going to be really interesting to me, as will be this inside. I mean, I just love the depth that the 49ers have on the inside, but the problem right now is that it's all mid-level depth. I'm not including Eric Armstead here and as part of this discussion, because I think he's an inside-out guy. He's a foundational piece. But between DJ Jones, Zach Kerr, Javon Kinlaw, Kevin Givens, and Maurice Hurst, those are all solid football players. None of them are stars. The 49ers want Javon Kinlaw to be a star. I think there's a chance that DJ Jones blossoms into a really plus player. The problem has been health. Zach Kerr was a plus player, but in limited opportunities for Carolina last year. And I think Maurice Hurst was an above average player for the Raiders. That's a lot of quality. And the 49ers are more excited about Kevin Givens than anybody else. D'Amico Ryans loves Kevin Givens, and so does Chris Kasarik. So that's a lot of quality talent on the interior defensive line, to where if you can just get one of these guys to peek through and become a true plus player, and I think the biggest hope is with Javon Kinlaw for the 49ers this season, you've got a really, really good-looking defensive line. And then it just turns into the search for edge depth and the need to stay healthy, of course. So I really like where the 49ers are with their defensive line, but it's not complete. There are still questions to answer, but you have to like some of the pieces that they're working with. I'm going to take a drink of water. Let's pop up Jimmy Garoppolo question. You guys can read this. I'm going to close the roster for now, and I'm going to drink. Not alcohol, it's just water. We got training camp tomorrow. I have to wake up really early. I'm still in the mountains. We're going to grill some burgers. Oh, by the way, have you guys seen this one? I'm going to grill another one of these. Let's make this big. That was dinner last night. A little double cheeseburger on the deck. Made it nice and juicy. Went with the standard American cheese. That's going to be dinner again because I still have 2 more patties to go through. Then I'm going to wake up at 5 and drive to Santa Clara tomorrow morning. All right, so I digress. We're going to go back to here and we're going to start answering questions. Is Jimmy Garoppolo's salary cap cost linear, meaning that halfway through the season, roughly half his 2021 cap cost has been used? Yes, almost all of Jimmy Garoppolo's money is in base salary, and base salary is divided by the 18 weeks of the year, 17 games plus 1 bye week. So you pay Jimmy Garoppolo's money in installments as the season goes along. So say that you trade him mid-season, you've only paid him about half of that, and then you get a cap credit the next year. So the power of Jimmy Garoppolo's current deal that a lot of people still, for some reason, have a big trouble understanding is the 49ers are in great position. They're in a pay-as-you-go situation, literally game by game with Jimmy Garoppolo. So pay-as-you-go is a powerful spot to be in because it gives you options as you go. You don't have to cross the bridge of decisions until you actually reach the river. So I just went on a radio show today where they asked me about this and why are fans so eager to just jettison Jimmy Garoppolo. And I said, quite frankly, for a franchise that was the original home of the quarterback controversy and depth in the quarterback room, it is flat out embarrassing that there are fans so stuck on wanting to just cut Jimmy Garoppolo right away. It is embarrassing to people's football knowledge to want to cut Jimmy Garoppolo right away. I mean, just stop talking about it. It's stupid. It doesn't make any sense from a roster construction standpoint because the 49ers have already budgeted to keep Jimmy Garoppolo, and no actual NFL executive in their right mind, only somebody playing Madden on rookie mode, is going to hand the keys without any backup plan to a quarterback who has only played at the FCS level and has only played 1 game since 2020 or since 2019. He's only played 1 game since 2019. That's Trey Lance. And I have the credibility to say this because I was on the Trey Lance train from before the time the 49ers made the pick. Okay. I said the 49ers back in like January, I said the 49ers need to think about picking Trey Lance and develop him with Jimmy Garoppolo. So it's not like I jumped on this Trey Lance train later. I am fully aboard with Trey Lance being the 49ers quarterback of the future, the 49ers developing the cost control of a rookie quarterback. But I'm also fully on board with not being an idiot. And if you're going to not complain about having too many good receivers, not complain about having too many good running backs, not complain about having too many good offensive linemen, why would you complain about having too many good quarterbacks? You can't have too many of the best position or of the most important position in football if you can afford it. And the 49ers can obviously afford it. And guess who would say the same exact things that I'm saying right now? Bill Walsh would say the same exact things. And for those people who have actually been fans of the 49ers, who know the history of the franchise, they know that Bill Walsh, when he had Joe Montana on his team, actively traded for Steve Young. And he had 2 great quarterbacks on his team because he knew that you benefit from having talent at the most important position. Now, the argument, saying, oh, that's not the same. There wasn't a salary cap then. I get it. The salary cap is a spending limitation. But if you have adapted your ways and built your cost structure around the spending limitation anyway, then the spending limitation is no longer there. So in the case of Jimmy Garoppolo on the roster, the 49ers can fit him right now. Now, what happens next? There are several possibilities. Of course, one is that Trey Lance absolutely blows everybody away from the first week of practice. I mean, it would be shocking, but it's a possibility. And the 49ers are like, whoa, we got to like start him in this preseason game. Let's see what he has in the game. And then he goes out and throws 4 touchdowns in 4 possessions, and he looks unbelievable in the preseason game. And then the 49ers really start thinking, and they're like, ooh, maybe, Shanahan views the film. Trey Lance ready for week 1. Of course, that you could cross that bridge when you get to it. Then maybe you do recoup some trade value for Garoppolo. But is that likely? No, because again, Trey Lance, FCS level, has played 1 game since 2019. In any realistic environment, you have to expect that Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be much more ready to tackle this 2021 season than Trey Lance. So the 49ers aren't committing themselves to any one option. And anybody who wants the 49ers to commit themselves to one option is basically telling the 49ers, hey, here's a saw. Why don't you cut off your leg for no reason? Why would you do that for no reason? It's just this weird hatred of Jimmy Garoppolo that permeates online that just doesn't make any sense. So I'll call it out for what it is. The 49ers are obviously playing the smart path here, and they're going to keep both quarterbacks and figure out what happens. In my opinion, Garoppolo probably is going to give you the best chance to win now. That's what Shanahan still thinks. He's even said that before. But when you look into the future, they traded so much for Trey Lance, they feel that he's going to be a transcendent talent moving forward. And once he develops, they think, Shanahan hopes he can be his Steve Young or his John Elway. And he can also get that transcendent talent on at least a couple years of a rookie contract, which will allow the 49ers to much more easily re-sign Nick Bosa and keep the roster together. So you made a move for Trey Lance to be financially sustainable in the future as well if he pans out. So I think the 49ers are trying to have their cake and eat it too in a situation where that's actually possible. All right. This is funny. Yeah, so I just wrote about Steve Young. Montana sat behind DeBerg. Young sat behind Montana. These were all great things, for the 49ers. It all worked out for them. As far as quarterback controversy, just let training camp start to play out until you talk about the controversy. Right now, Shanahan has said, I do not expect Trey Lance to come in and start because it's going to be hard to take out Jimmy Garoppolo. It's not just some kind of bridge quarterback. So, again, there are no absolutes. I don't pretend that there are absolutes, but I like to deal in realism. And when we don't deal in realism, and Twitter is good at that, Twitter is good at getting off into fantasy land, we can really start having irrational discussions, and that's good for nobody. So I need to go start grilling. This is a good point right here. Seems like the longer the season goes, the more value he has to retain him. The thing about Jimmy Garoppolo is, this is how I'm going to end this, because this is obviously what everybody wants to talk about. It's hard to bring up fresh content and we see the other guys at practice. The Jimmy Garoppolo situation could go, in my opinion, one of 3 ways. The first way that it can go is the disaster way for the 49ers. And this is one of the main reasons why they actually traded up to get Trey Lance. The disaster way is that Garoppolo gets hurt again, right? Garoppolo gets hurt again. He's not available in the 2021 season. When that happened in 2018 and when it happened in 2020, the 49ers season was completely torpedoed. They didn't have a competent backup quarterback behind him. Presumably, because Trey Lance is so talented, they can get him up to at least enough speed, or maybe Josh Rosen up to enough speed to where they'll have some level of competence behind Jimmy Garoppolo, so that if the disaster option 1 or scenario 1 does occur, the 49ers won't be completely sunk in the event of a Garoppolo injury. So that's scenario 1. You can't rule that out. That's one of the reasons the 49ers made the trade up to grab Trey Lance. They wanted to make sure they were insulated behind Garoppolo for the short term. Option 2 is probably the most likely option, but it's also not guaranteed. And it's that Garoppolo plays well, because every time Garoppolo has been healthy for the 49ers, he has played well, and he leads them into the playoffs. But the 49ers don't win the Super Bowl. Why is that not likely? Because it's hard to win the Super Bowl, as we've seen time and time again. It's not likely, actually, for any team to win the Super Bowl. I think everybody in the NFL has less than 50% odds at this point. So a lot of stuff has to go right. But assume that Garoppolo puts on a good season of film and the 49ers play well and they reach the Super Bowl. What is it? 56. And they reach Super Bowl 56 this year. In that scenario, or they reach the playoffs. They don't reach Super Bowl 56, or they lose in Super Bowl 56. I think a successful season, a winning season, you may not consider it successful, but a winning season like that with Garoppolo at the helm is probably the most likely path for the 49ers. If that happens, you'll see Jimmy Garoppolo's trade value go up because he's actually proven that he could stay healthy again for a season. He's put some good play on film. Yet the 49ers will be ready to move on to Trey Lance because they won't feel obligated to stay with a quarterback that, hasn't proven that he could take them to the very promised land and win the Super Bowl. So in that case, the 49ers would be sitting on a great asset in Jimmy Garoppolo, right? Making only $25 million for his next team in 22, under contract with the 49ers, and they could probably trade him and get some good trade value out of him. Then there's scenario 3. Scenario 3 is not likely either. It's less likely than scenario 2 for sure, but it can't be ruled out because the 49ers in 2019 were only minutes away from winning the Super Bowl in which Jimmy Garoppolo would have been the MVP. So what if Jimmy Garoppolo continues his natural progression, which he's shown when he's healthy, and the 49ers win the Super Bowl this season, and Jimmy Garoppolo is the MVP? And he makes a very strong case that he's an integral part of the team, and the 49ers enter 2022 with the Lombardi trophy in their hands and their quarterback still under contract. In my opinion, in that scenario, they're not getting rid of Jimmy Garoppolo. And as much as that's been termed a problem by some people, it's a problem that everybody would just hug and embrace and love to have around the whole NFL. Every single team would love to have that problem. And I'm pretty sure that if everybody wants to have your problem, it's not a problem, but it is still a possibility. So this is why the 49ers have tried to leave themselves as much wiggle room and option power as possible. It's why Jed York has even said if we need to keep Jimmy Garoppolo for 2022, we have the wherewithal and the room to do it. And it's why you just can't rule anything out at this point. It might be the least likely of the 3 options, but it still is a possibility because it's already been demonstrated to be a possibility based on what happened in 2019. So in this situation, again, there's a river. The 49ers at some point will get to the river. They're going to have to build a bridge and they're going to have to cross the bridge when they get to that river. And right now they have all kinds of different supplies to be able to build that bridge. If you cut Jimmy Garoppolo right now, if you, trade him prematurely, you're going to get to a river and you're going to have thrown away some of the critical supplies to build the bridge before you even get there. So you don't throw away or you don't use any of the supplies until you actually get to the river because you don't know exactly what that river is going to look like. And, there's a chance that it looks like something that Trey Lance is going to take over the starting job much sooner than later, or there's a chance that you're not going to want to get rid of Jimmy Garoppolo. Those may both be small chances, with the most likely chance being that Jimmy Garoppolo starts this season and Trey Lance is, really seamlessly ushered in next year. But until you know for sure, in any game of poker, you don't play your cards early. Like you play your cards when you have to. And that's where the 49ers are right now. So hopefully that explains it. The great news is the training camp starts tomorrow. So we'll begin the process of heading toward that river, and we'll have the answers to our questions sooner rather than later. That's what I'm most excited about. I just want to get to that point. I want to stop this endless speculation. And that's why this is such a big day. It was the longest offseason ever, from January all the way to July. But on July 27th, we're going to talk to Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch in person in the Levi Stadium Auditorium for the first time in 550 days. Just think about that, since after the NFC title game before the Super Bowl. So it's going to be fun. Thanks for following along. Make sure you keep on doing it. And I will check back in with you guys after training camp starts. So have a great night, everybody. Get some good sleep. We have a fun few months ahead of us. Bye-bye now.